I have been hesitant to make this video. Is Bakura, you know, the greatest evil to ever exist, actually a good guy? As you can understand, most people at this point in the video will be like, nope. And I even made a YouTube short regarding this topic, just to test the waters. And let's just say, you guys were not happy with me. Okay, I'm gonna ignore the sarcasm on this one. And this felt a little personal. I definitely have my work cut out for me with this video, guys. However, we always push the boat out on this channel. And as Yugi once said,
I've never backed away, and I'm not starting now!
I am someone who likes to see the best in everyone, even if that person is evil incarnate. But you have to ask yourself, was Bakura always evil? Or was it truly only the case when he joined forces with Zork? Let me paint you guys a story. What if this entire time you've been lied to, fed a narrative from the perspective of the winners? I mean, history is written by them after all. Let's look at the original timeline of Yugioh for the events that occurred in the ancient past. I'm talking before it was turned into a board game where the rules were dictated by Zork and Atem. I am talking about how things played out the first time around, where Atem was forced to seal Zork away with his own soul into the Millennium Puzzle in order to defeat the darkness which plagued Egypt 3,000 years ago. Now, before the time of Atem, Akhenaten ruled over Egypt. Now, were they times of peace? No, it was a time of war, with Akhenaten's kingdom being attacked by other warring kingdoms. Now, from their perspective, we see them as the victims, as the attackers are referred to as enemies. But the real reason they're being attacked is because they are in the possession of the Millennium Spellbook. What is the Millennium Spellbook, you ask? Well, let's just say it's equivalent to a modern day nuclear bomb. This spellbook has dark magic that has been rumored to be able to destroy civilizations and could lead to the destruction of human life as we know it. Do we know where they obtained the spellbook? No. Do we know the full extent of its actual powers? We don't. Can we recreate a power like this? We can't. Now let's look at it from the other kingdom's point of view. Of course they would feel threatened by an unknown power that could destroy them at any time. Were they supposed to live in fear and wait to be destroyed? Or they could take action? It's like being neighbors with someone who has a button to detonate your entire existence at any point, by a power you can't even comprehend. They were so afraid of these enemies getting their hands on the spellbook and causing untold damage to the land, they never stopped to consider maybe they were the enemies. And ironically, this leads to them freeing Zork, the eternal darkness.
敵の目的は間違いなく我が国に古代より伝わる千年魔術書。
千年魔術書。そこに記されし魔術の法を解いた者は神と魔物を操り、あらゆる軍勢もひれ伏す力を得るという。
The power balance in the kingdoms had shifted, but you could argue that they weren't harming anyone with the Millennium Spellbook, but they were working on decoding it. And I don't think it was ever for only research. It was done as a way to boost their own strength. And the worst part of it, this was done under the nose of the Pharaoh, Akhenaten. The Pharaoh had no idea that a portion of the spellbook had already been translated, and only found out at the moment total annihilation was at their front door.
いえ、王よ。一部は済んでおります。
何？それは誠か、アクナディン。
はい。そこに記されていたのは闇の錬金術。
So you can imagine what else was being done under the Pharaoh's nose. Bakura accused the old Pharaoh of being a tyrannical one, but I don't think it was aimed at him personally. I think it was aimed at his time as Pharaoh, because when we meet Akhenaten, he doesn't seem like a tyrant, quite the opposite actually. He was loved by his people. However, he was a figurehead to keep the people happy, a pretty face, masking the shadows and darkness. And when war threatened his kingdom and the lives of his people, he cowered away in defeat.
もはやこれまでか。
アクナムカノンを諦めてはなりませぬ。
His brother suggested using the power of the Millennium Spellbook in order to craft the 7 Millennium items, and Akhenaten approved this idea, knowing full well the spellbook was a source of darkness. He must have known that this must come at a price. When making a deal with the devil, there is always a price to pay. Aknam Kanan simply chooses to ignore this and leaves it to his brother, so he could lead a life of ignorance, choosing to turn a blind eye, as long as everything is okay in the end and his own hands weren't dirty. So it doesn't surprise me that there were many dark secrets to do with the kingdom that were simply overlooked. Aknam Kanan could easily look into his brother's affairs and do things the right way, but chooses not to in order for the preservation of his kingdom. Now you're probably wondering when I'm going to wrap this back to Bakura, and how is he a good guy? Well, to do that I first need to lay out the environment in which Bakura was born, which I think is very key to the narrative, as it was a very toxic one, full of lies and secrets. Now, in order to craft the Millennium items, they needed to kill and harvest 99 souls. Akhenaten hypnotized a bunch of soldiers and forced them to massacre a village called Kul Elna. Now again, we are led to believe that this village is full of thieves and criminals. Or is this something Akhenaten tells the hypnotized soldiers so they kill without mercy and remorse?
我らが王宮の墓を暴き続ける盗賊の村なり。この国の危機は奴らの行いが神の怒りに触れたためである。奴らを裁き、その罪を償わせよ。
But have you guys ever stopped and wondered, is it entirely possible that they chose a small village? A village which was of no consequence to the surrounding kingdoms. A village with no defenses, but actually containing innocent families who won't be missed if they were wiped from existence. When we pan over to the scene of them being slaughtered, we see excited soldiers laughing and jeering, taking pleasure in their killing. And on the other hand, we see frightened families begging for their lives. Innocent children meeting their end at the dead of night, with only one survivor, which was Bakura, seeing bodies of those he once knew being mercilessly flung into a cauldron. Who are the real criminals in this story? Think about it. Now, we don't get to see Bakura's life up until he is grown and considered a threat to the pharaoh. However, we can imagine how incredibly difficult it was. He probably had to do many unpleasant things just to survive, but that's who Bakura is. He's a survivor. But most importantly, you have to remember that he was all alone. Now, you could argue this led Bakura to be evil. He became twisted and full of hate and anger and revenge. But again, whose narrative is that? Let's switch your point of view, and let's say Bakura was the protagonist. We as an audience would be rooting for him to take down the pharaoh's kingdom. We would want him to gain power. We would want him to be strong, so he could avenge his family and friends, like we do with most of the protagonists who have a traumatic background. You guys have to remember, a villain is only a villain through the eyes of the hero, and it's our job to decide who the hero is. And just like any protagonist arc, Bakura becomes strong. He uses the souls of his fallen family and friends to help him grow the Deerbound inside of him. Deerbound could be seen as the symbol of hope for the injustice that has occurred. However, our perception is skewed because it's a snake-like creature, and it isn't a noble knight or a warrior like Seto's Duos. Can you guys not see that in the original timeline, Bakura is the hero of the story? He alone tries to fight against a mighty, overwhelming force, against the keepers of the Millennium items, against the pharaoh and his gods. He is the underdog of the story. However, we don't get to see this in the Memory World arc, because as soon as it begins, the hero of the story, Thief Bakura, is inhabited by Zork right at the very start. So all the actions that take place are because of Zork and not because of Thief Bakura. See, because Thief Bakura in the original timeline was the hero facing overwhelming odds. However, where his protagonist era ends is when he realizes that the pharaoh and his guardians are too strong. He finds this out when he challenges attempt to a duel, and the obelisk puts a stop to Deerbound. And for the first time, Bakura realizes that this battle can't be won. So he seeks a higher power, which is Zork, which leads him down the wrong path of evil. And the storyline shifts. Bakura goes from a rebel, a freedom fighter, fighting for injustice, to a legit criminal aiding Zork in taking over the world and spreading darkness. Even in the Memory World arc, when Zork leaves Thief Bakura's body, he is left as a scapegoat, which was used and no longer needed. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Atem and the Guardians are good people. They want the best for their people and their kingdom. Well, that's simply not the case. The kingdom is just as toxic as it was during Akhenaten Canon's rule. We see clips of Seto harvesting creatures from inside of people in the streets of Egypt, taking the monsters out of them before they even have a chance to commit a crime, acting as a judge and jury.
我々が一体何の罪を犯したというのですか。
まだ罪を犯してはおらぬ。その可能性をこれから探るのだ。
そんな。
And all of this without the pharaoh's knowledge. In the palace itself, we see secret torture rooms where criminals are made to fight against each other. And you guys say that Atem was a good pharaoh. I mean, in the Memory World arc, Atem was definitely fair and just. But this version of Atem had spent years with little Yugi, molded into having similar values and learned to spare and show compassion to others. But what was he like in the original timeline? I mean, in season 0, we see Atem without any memories, and his punishments were brutal. He seemed to have a clear idea on what was right and what was wrong, yet he sentenced people to some horrific punishment games with his shadow magic. I'm not saying these weren't justified, however, this was definitely a different attempt to what we're used to. And just because Atem had no memories, this shouldn't affect his natural instincts or his brutal methods. I mean, this was even touched upon in the Orichalco saga, where he was accused of being a cruel and evil pharaoh.
お前はかつてどんな王だった。絶対的権力、そして力を得たお前がしたこと。俺がしたこと。
Now you can't take his words as gospel, as Darts was a confirmed liar and manipulator, but what if there was some truth in those words? What if Atem wasn't the kind, caring pharaoh when he was ruling in the original timeline? This would definitely add to the theory that Bakura in the original timeline was the good guy, trying to fight against a pharaoh and the guardians who pretty much did whatever they liked, showing no regard for the people or their own kingdom. I think where Bakura went wrong was attempting to use the power of Zork. However, against such overwhelming odds, for example facing the 3 Egyptian god cards, what does one do? So just to be clear, I think Thief Bakura was actually the hero of the story, and from his point of view, it's actually scary how much that makes sense. However, as soon as Zork came into the picture and corrupted him, well, everything changes. So as soon as their souls merge, I can't condone any of his actions after that, because Zork had taken over. I truly believe spreading darkness to the entire world and causing humanity to fall to its knees wasn't the original purpose of Thief Bakura. All he wanted was to overthrow a corrupt kingdom and to get justice for his village. Guys, I am genuinely very curious to hear your feedback on this video, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And go click that sub button, guys, you know you want to. Until next time.